Can you tell the difference between these two drawings of boxes? Well, you might notice that the one on the right seems a little bit more like a realistic upshot, like a low-angle photograph looking up at buildings. But what you're seeing here is the difference between 2-point and 3-point perspective. And even though you might think that 3-point perspective is scary, really the only difference is the way that verticals are handled. So here you can see on the left, verticals are all parallel. They go straight up and down. But on the right, they converge ever so slightly towards a vanishing point way in the sky. So your 3 vanishing points are the left and right, which both fall on the horizon, and then the third is either way above the horizon or way below. Okay, do you remember how we did the projecting, sort of the rules of how to navigate a 2D perspective grid? Well, now let's navigate a 3D perspective grid. So we'll start from the center point. Just like before, we can project to the right or to the left. And now instead of going straight up and straight down, up goes towards the vanishing point or away from the vanishing point. So that's it. If I were to start from this new point here to go to the right, would be to that vanishing point, and the left would be off towards that vanishing point. So if I were to take this point here, I would not go straight up and straight down. That would break the perspective. Instead, I recede up towards the top vanishing point or down away from the vanishing point. But other than that, all the rules are exactly the same. So really there's not that much that's scary about 3-point perspective. It's essentially the same as 2-point perspective, except the way that the verticals work. So let's take a look at that perspective grid template. So this should look pretty familiar. We've got all the same elements as the 2D perspective grid, except there's an extra point. Just like before, I can move the picture plane around. I can transform it. I can also move the right and left points closer together or further away. But the additional point is the upshot or downshot. So right now the only one visible is the upshot. And you can see that this is a very far away point. I have to scroll way up to even get to it. But if I want to have a more exaggerated upshot, like I'm using a really wide angle lens, I would actually move that upshot point down. And in doing so, I'm making it a broader skew. Because remember, anytime you bring one of the perspective points closer to your picture plane, that's when it gets to a more distorted perspective. So I'm going to move this back vertical. But other than that, all the rules are the same. So you would move these components around and compose your perspective grids. And if you don't want to do an upshot, say you wanted to do a downshot, you would hide the upshot layer and reveal the downshot layer and work in the exact same way. And when you're happy with it, drag a marquee, make a flat copy, and you're good to go. And once you've got your 3-point perspective grid, it's all the same from here on out. So the first thing I'd recommend you doing once you've made these is try doing the rectangles on the ground plane activity. Now actually this is exactly the same in both 2 and 3-point perspective. The third point really only affects the height and depth of objects. So if it's just a 2D plane on the ground, it'll be the same. It's when you then go and practice projecting up and down that it feels a bit different. So here if I wanted to give this cube some depth here, I'd be following to the vanishing point. So what I'd recommend you do is all of the exercises from the earlier videos. Work on projecting, but in 3D space, this time with 3 points. And make sure to do both down shots like this one, but also up shots, because they function exactly the same, but sometimes they can play tricks on the eye. So again, just getting used to working in the 3D grid like this is really useful for when we start doing more detailed, organic freehand drawing. Drawing cubes just helps you get in the mindset.